On today's episode of Cubs 360, we're going to talk about Kyle Hendricks, former Cub pitcher, now going to the Los Angeles Angels. We're going to talk about a couple of trade rumors that have been circling around the Chicago Cubs. We're going to talk about some prospects because there are some that might be on the move. And we're also going to talk about Carter Hawkins, the Cubs GM, with a spicy quote about Christopher Morel. That's all happening soon on Cubs 360. Jack from Cubs 360. Thank you for tuning in to episode 3 of the Cubs 360 podcast. Before we begin, feel free to like and subscribe, and also follow us on Twitter at Cubs 360. So again, there's a lot to get to in this episode. We're going to talk about free agency because free agency has officially begun, and we're going to talk about Kyle Hendricks, now former Chicago Cubs pitcher, the last remaining member of that 2016 team, signing with the Los Angeles Angels. So the Angels agreed on a 1-year, $2.5 million contract with right-hand pitcher Kyle Hendricks. So, again, Hendricks, he's 34 years old. He finished his 11th season, all 11 previous with the Cubs. He appeared in 29 games, started 24 of them, and his record was 4-12 with an ERA of 5.92 with 130.2 innings pitched and 86 earned runs with 87 strikeouts. So he pitched to a 4.29 earned runs against through 94.1 innings with 45 earned runs across 20 appearances, 17 starts. And he finished the year by posting a 2.89 earned runs against through 28 innings and 9 earned runs across his final 5 starts in September. So, again, this is a pitcher, for the Chicago Cubs. Everybody knows him. He was one of the most well-known players on that 2016 World Series team. He was the starter of Game 6 of that National League Championship Series with a phenomenal outing against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Went through 7.1 innings and just really kept it tight for the Los Angeles Dodgers in that game. And obviously, as most of you know, it was a double play that sent the Cubs to the World Series in 2016. He also started Game 7 of that World Series. So that was pretty special as well. So it's a bittersweet day for Chicago Cubs fans, obviously, because even though Kyle Hendricks didn't have the best of years last year, and he couldn't really replicate what he did in 2023 and previously, it's really sad to see because obviously Kyle Hendricks was not only a loved pitcher in Chicago, but the last remaining member from that World Series team. So it's a completely new team now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. Also, congratulations to Kyle Hendricks, obviously getting that deal with the Los Angeles Angels. The Angels are at a bit of a crossroads. Obviously, they had a very terrible season last year. They need to shake up a lot of things. So maybe he gets that opportunity with them, but I'm very happy for him. Now we're going to go back to some trade rumors that the Cubs have been circled in. Obviously, their number one target has been starting pitching, and obviously there's been some free agents that have been circled around them. They are not expected to pursue Juan Soto or Corbin Burnes. Soto doesn't surprise me that much. I just never thought there was enough money for him. Corbin Burnes I'm a little bit disappointed in because, like I said, you can go back to my first video where I talk about Corbin Burnes quite a bit. And they've also been in rumors with Max Fried, who's a lefty. You can go back to that as well. But let's get to some trade rumors because winter meetings have started for MLB GMs. So we're going to talk about 2 pitchers that the Cubs have been circled in rumors with. The first one is across town with the Chicago White Sox, and that is starting pitcher Garrett Crochet. So the rumor has been great for the Cubs, and we're just going to go through this article quite a bit. So the White Sox obviously hold the rights to the best available starting pitcher on the trade market, obviously Garrett Crochet. And he was obviously held on at the deadline. The White Sox are expected to move him during the offseason at some point. So while teams have checked on Crochet's availability, Bruce Levine of 670 The Score and Marquee Sports Network added clarity to his market. So rumors on teams being the favorite for obtaining White Sox pitcher Garrett Crochet are just that. There is no sourcing coming from Chris Getz or the front office. With the rebuild, players need to have long contract control coming back in any deal. The position players are the priority. So that's really what the White Sox are looking for some position players. And that's been some big talk for some players in the Chicago Cubs organization because there are an abundance of position players, especially in the infield, that they are looking to trade, whether that's prospects and whatnot. It would have to be an impact talent, obviously, going back, and Crochet checks to the box as it would provide the Cubs with another ace to their rotation to go next to Justin Steele and Shota Imanaga. So I really like Garrett Crochet, but again, with Max Fried as another concern that I had in the other episode, he's a lefty. So, and I'm not really I know he had a really good year with the Chicago White Sox. He had a ton of strikeouts. He was really phenomenal, but I'm not 100% sure if that's the right route for the Cubs to take. So even though it could happen, I'm not going to completely rule that out, but I would rather go for some other guys rather than Garrett Crochet, even though Garrett Crochet is a good pitcher, don't get me wrong. We're going to go to the second guy now, and this has actually sparked a ton of rumors. So Jed Hoyer, obviously, most of you know, is the president of baseball operations for the Chicago Cubs. This website is talking about the Chicago Cubs and the Seattle Mariners cooking up a blockbuster trade. So we're just going to read through this right now. And as most of you know, they've been rumored for starting pitching during the offseason. But one thing that they've been doing over this so far, and this is also from Bruce Levine of the 670 The Score, the executive of these two teams, Jed Hoyer and Jerry DiPoto, who is the president of baseball operations for the Seattle Mariners. And as you know, the Mariners have a surplus of arms. So we're going to read through this quote from Levine. The pitching-rich Mariners may be a trade match and could be interested in the talented young infielders coming through the Cubs system, such as Matt Shaw and James Triantos. Hoyer was seen talking with Mariners president of baseball operations Jerry DiPoto on Wednesday after the sessions at the GM meetings had broken off for the morning. And obviously that's pretty interesting. It was already shared here at Chicago Cubs on SI. Another Cubs top prospect, Owen Casey, was named, generating trade buzz from other teams around the league, and we'll get to Casey in a little bit. And other teams have been pretty interested in him, and based on the number of top prospects this organization currently has in their pipeline, they could look to move a few to land an established major leaguer this offseason. So you're probably asking yourself, what does that have to do with Seattle Mariners? But we're going to get to it right now. They have 4 very solid young starters who could all become huge pieces of Chicago's rotation going forward in George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, and Brandon Wu. Of the 4, Gilbert could be the most likely moved. He actually has a bit of there's been contract installments with the Mariners. His contract actually isn't up until 2028, so that definitely fits the picture of what Jed Hoyer's trying to do. Obviously, when he traded for Isaac Paredes in the summer, he said he wants to look beyond 2024 for trades. And obviously, Paredes, who has struggled a little bit with the Chicago Cubs since coming from the Tampa Bay Rays, he does have a decent contract. He was an all-star this past season at third base. And with the contract that he has with, I believe, 3 more years left after this, Gilbert is one that can really fit with this Cubs rotation. And on top of that, he is a righty, and some people considered him the ace in Seattle. So I think that's really interesting. So they were looking for offensive upgrades. This is Seattle I'm talking about. But he made his first All-Star game and leading the American League in innings pitched this past season. It could change their plans. Kirby projects to be Seattle's future ace, and the Cubs might not be interested in Wu at this point based on some early injury concerns. So it could leave Gilbert being the player this package would be centered around. And obviously, it's something to monitor this winter as Hoyer looks to bolster Chicago's roster. So, like I said, Logan Gilbert, is the most likely to be moved from the Seattle Mariners if they were to move him. And if that's the case, Chicago would be all over it. They have a ton of prospects that they can move, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But I believe Logan Gilbert is probably the number one option for me if we're looking at trade candidates for pitchers, because Gilbert he's only 27 years old, I believe. He's a really, really phenomenal pitcher. Don't get me wrong. So I think if you're not going to get a free agent pitcher like Corbin Burns, even if you get Max Fried, I don't know what the deal is going to be in free agency for the Cubs, but I think getting a guy like Logan Gilbert with the prospects that you have, I think if you're able to make that trade, I think you do it, especially with the rumors in the GM meetings with the Mariners and the Cubs. Now we're going to go to the prospects, because that's what the big elephant in the room is. What are some prospects that could be on the move? And I talked about him just a second ago. We're going to talk about Owen Casey, and he was the top outfield prospect mentioned in trade buzz at the GM meetings. So we're just going to talk about this right now. Owen Casey is a popular name in early-stage trade buzz at the GM meetings. He's only 22 years old. He came off of a really phenomenal season. He came off of an impressive AAA season in Iowa with a .848 OPS, but he doesn't have a clear path to everyday bats in a crowded MLB outfield in Chicago, obviously because you have Seiya Suzuki or Cody Bellinger, either or at right field. You have Pete Crow Armstrong, who showed a lot of great development, and obviously Ian Happ, who, by the way, won his third consecutive Gold Glove award, so congratulations to Ian Happ on that. But Owen Casey just doesn't have a spot for this team, and so do a lot of prospects on this team. So they're going to have to look to move some of them off. But, again, we're going to see. Owen Casey is definitely a prospect, like I said, that you're going to look at. And we're just going to go over a little bit more information. Let's get the obvious fact out of the way because the Cubs seem to have their starting outfield set, like I just said, with the designated hitter. It doesn't mean Casey doesn't have a runway to playing time in the major league level. One thing that has defined the Cubs season in each of the past 2 years is Suzuki missing up to a month due to a soft tissue injury. While no injury can be forecasted, history would suggest that a prospect like Casey should have an opportunity at extended playing time at some point during the 2025 season. But the question is it going to be with Chicago? Because right now, from what I'm seeing with the trade possibility that he has, with the starting rotation needs that we need, I definitely think this is a possibility that Owen Casey might not be with our organization after this winter. He could be somewhere else while we're looking for major league starting pitching talent. We're going to go over to 3 other prospects that could be out of the way for the Cubs. They might not be here just like Casey as a possibility. We're going to start off with Brennan Davis. So Brennan Davis was once seen as an exciting prospect in Chicago's system, but due to injuries and underperformance, his stock has plummeted. He is the 26th ranked prospect on MLB Pipeline to the Chicago Cubs, a far cry from where he was just a couple of years ago. So he slashed a .220, .369, .451 overall in 55 games, and he only hit 11 home runs and drew a ton of walks, but his batting average was extremely low. He struck out 51 times in 55 games, and again, he just played 55 games in 2024. He's appeared in more than 71 games just once in his 6th minor league season, and that came back in 2021. So he had 6 minor league seasons. He's only played more than 70 in 2021. So he has a strong knowledge of the strike zone and has a lot of power, but his hit tool is far from polished, and injuries are a concern. And that is a big problem, too. If he can't stay healthy with the play that he had, I mean, I just don't understand how he's going to have a spot with this team. So Brendan Davis, all the best, but hopefully he can be able to recover from some of these injuries. But the problem is with what we have going on right now, I just don't see him having much of a spot with this team. And now number 2, this is a big one. Kevin Alcantara. So he's the number 6 prospect. Most of you know him because he came from the Yankees in the Anthony Rizzo deal. And he went to the majors at the end of the season when the Cubs were eliminated from the playoffs. In the final series, I believe, against the Phillies and then the Reds, he was up for the Chicago Cubs. But he only had 1 hit and 10 at-bats in the short stint. But he's still an exciting prospect. I just don't see a spot for him as well. Kevin Alcantara, just like Owen Casey, are 2 phenomenal outfield prospects. But the problem is, where are they going to play with how crowded our outfield is? So he could be an enticing trade candidate for some of these players as well. And then number 1, and I talked about him just a second ago too, James Triantos. So he's the number 5 prospect for the Cubs, according to MLB Pipeline, and the number 55 overall on MLB's Pipeline's top 100 list. So he sees some time in the outfield, but he's primarily an infielder, seeing most of his minor league time at the Keystone at the hot corner. So he plays third base, and of the 150 games he played, 86 of them came in second. The 21-year-old doesn't have much power, but he hit .300, splitting time between the AA Tennessee and AAA Iowa, and stealing 47 bases. He can absolutely be a leadoff hitter at the MLB level in the not-too-distant future, especially considering the fact that he finished last season in AAA, and he played pretty good. So he's an exciting prospect, just like the others that the Cubs shouldn't be rushing to trade, but similar to Alcantara, it's safe to ask, where is he going to play? And that is the main problem. You have Nico Horner, who won a Gold Glove. You have Isaac Paredes, who was an all-star. But the main guy that's looking to get a spot is Matt Shaw, and he is one of the best prospects in all of baseball. He's an infielder. His main position is shortstop, but there's a very likely chance he could play second base because I don't know if he can be able to play third more. So, because you have Dansby at shortstop. If anything, I'm more confident that a guy like Matt Shaw would play second and you trade Nico Horner, and that's been a different conversation. I don't really see that happening, but we'll see. So, Isaac Paredes, as most of you know, is the third baseman, and he's not going to really go anywhere. Michael Busch is at first, and he's not going to go anywhere too. And like I said, Triantos has seen some outfield time, but it's loaded. So, Triantos does not have a clear future with the Cubs, as well as a lot of prospects. They've built a really phenomenal prospect pool. They have 8 prospects in the top 100. That is the most of any team in baseball. So, with the opportunity that these guys have with the Cubs, which is very limited, I can see you package some of them up and potentially trade them for starting pitching, maybe even a starting catcher, because we do need a catcher. There's no really particular name that comes to mind. The only guy I can really see is maybe Shea Langeliers from Oakland, but I don't even think that's going to happen. Logan O'Hoppe is not going to go anywhere from the Angels. So the catching market for the Cubs is really limited. You probably have to go with a guy in free agency, and we don't even know if that's going to happen. But regardless, they need a guy to play with Miguel Amaya, particularly a starting catcher, as Amaya is probably going to be the backup. But those are just some prospects, and we'll see what happens with that because, like I said, some of these guys might not even be traded, but there's a chance that some are because they're not going to get the opportunity, and they definitely deserve MLB playing time. It's just not going to be the Cubs. So we're going to talk about the last part, and this is pretty interesting. So I saw this on Twitter at Locked On Cubs, and this was from 670 The Score, I believe, as well. And this was GM Carter Hawkins talking about Isaac Paredes. And I'm just going to pull this up right now. When asked about Isaac Paredes today on 670 The Score, this is Locked On Cubs on Twitter, Cubs GM Carter Hawkins took an unnecessary, quote-unquote, unnecessary shot at Christopher Morel by pointing out the Rays play indoors. Morel wasn't the best version of himself either after the trade, and we know the wind wasn't blowing in there. So I know a lot of people were pretty outraged at this, but the truth is he was not wrong. Christopher Morel was not good this year, and even after the trade, he played even worse. So I understand where Carter Hawkins is coming with this, and obviously the Rays play indoors, so you can't even blame the Wrigley Field wind in Chicago for the excuses of his poor play. There's a reason they traded him, because he wasn't good. So I don't really see this as a shot. I look at this as Carter Hawkins calling it the way he sees it. And the way he's seeing it right now, I'm seeing it too. Because I watched the Cubs last year, and Christopher Morel was quite a weak link for the Cubs. That's why they traded him. They upgraded to Isaac Paredes. So, again, Carter Hawkins, and you can think what you want about this. I definitely believe that Carter Hawkins has a point when he says this. But regardless, Morel, like I said, just not good. Paredes, when he went here, he was all right. Nothing special. He is going to have to step it up. But when a player's not playing good, he has the right to call him out. If you want to be a serious team, which the Cubs are trying to be, it's not all about friendship and this and that. If you suck, take accountability and make it known. And that's what Carter Hawkins is doing here. And look, I'm no big fan of Carter Hawkins. I think his development with the prospects that he's done has been pretty good. Obviously, he came from the Cleveland Guardians organization. He's been there for many years. He has a lot to do with their development. And obviously, Jed Hoyer is a big fan of how Cleveland develops their team. But again, we'll see what happens with this. I think it's fair, this quote that Carter Hawkins said about Christopher Morel, but I understand why a lot of people are pretty outraged by this because you don't normally see a GM really say this that much. So that's really all I have to say in this episode, but give me your thoughts on this. So there's a lot to unravel from this past week from the Chicago Cubs, talking about some prospects that could be on the move, talking about a couple of trade rumors from a couple of starting pitchers, talking about Kyle Hendricks going to the Angels, and then obviously this quote here. Give me your thoughts on this. Give me your thoughts on some free agency targets because, again, the Cubs I do think will be involved in this offseason quite a lot, whether it's through free agency or through trade. But regardless, Jed Hoyer has a lot of work to do, like I said, and we better get some answers soon. So, Again, like and subscribe. But for now, this is Cubs 360. I'm your host, Jack, and go Cubs go.